at, you know, troubleshoot any problems. And then also I just like to see what people are up to and they're doing. So this kind of topic came out of that because I have a bunch of people who now have done their first set of educational events and are in the follow-up process. And during our conversations, I noticed um, some issues that I think are kind of common when it comes to the follow-up process after events. So that's where we're coming from when I talk about today's topic. I also want to make a just a general announcement that if there's anything in particular you'd like to see us cover during these meetings in the future, please feel free to let us know in chat or to email us. Again, I like to come up with these topics by real life things I see from advisors. So if there's something that you would love more info on, I'd love to focus on that in an upcoming session. So please feel free to let us know again in the chat, or you can always email advisorclient@horsesmouth.com and we can do that too. But back to the main event for today, which is all about kind of the critical 30 days of follow-up post-event. Like I said, I was talking with a group of advisors earlier or late last week about the follow-up they were doing post-event. And one trend that I've noticed in this group and then in other advisors I've worked with before is that often there's a little bit of hesitation, I would say, in the follow-up, meaning advisors are really good at getting the follow-up out immediately, but there's this fear of coming off as too pushy, too salesy. And so the follow-up tends to kind of be a watered down version of what you really want the prospect to do. So I want to talk about some important things that should be in our follow-up. But before I get into that, I want to say that uh, your follow-up actually starts during your event. Um, you don't want people leaving the event not knowing what the follow-up process is going to be. Advisors who are doing educational events on a regular basis and actually really building their business around this have something in common about their follow-up, and that's that they mention it during their presentation 2, 3 times a night. Um, and that's not, again, it's not like a salesy thing, but they want people to be aware of what is going to come next. So many advisors during their introduction will mention uh, that, you know, if you want to follow up, this is what's going to happen, X, Y, and Z. It's mentioned during the presentation and again at the end. That is really critical. Whatever you do after the event needs to build on the conversations that you had during that event. So number one is that kind of the number one thing to keep in mind is that your follow-up has to happen as soon as you start that event. I was talking to an advisor in our last financial educator group, and he was saying how during his event, you know, he hands out his evaluation form at the as people are coming into the room. He does his events at colleges and universities. So they sit down, they get paperwork. He has a special evaluation form that's like a different color piece of paper, which is kind of best practice. And he mentions early on during, his kind of intro is, I want to point you to these resources you have. The first being your evaluation sheet. I also want you to use this sheet to write down any questions that you have during the presentation. And on this sheet too, you'll also be able to indicate if you would like to schedule a meeting. And so he references that right in the beginning. And then again at the end of the presentation, he walks people through that. So they know immediately that there is this option for them to follow up. So that's number one, is that you need to mention it during the presentation. And again, this isn't to like oversell people into coming to your meeting, but at an educational event, people are going to have questions. Some of those questions you'll be able to take during the event, but some of those questions are going to be specific to their situation and not appropriate for you to answer at a group setting. And that's, you want people to know that, okay, if you have a question about your taxes and retirement or what your specific Social Security claiming strategy is going to look like, I'm happy to answer those, but that's something that needs to happen in a 15-minute phone call afterwards or a meeting, whatever your kind of next step is for people. Again, that's not you being salesy, that's you wanting to help people, but understanding that there's certain questions that you need more information from or are personal and people don't want to air that information in front of a group. And it's also not fair for the whole group to have to sit and hear about someone's personal situation that may or may not apply to them. So number one, Follow-up happens during the event. You let people know what that follow-up is going to look like, and you mention it multiple times. Two, um, now let's say the event has ended, right? You've done your event, uh, you said goodbyes, you got home. What happens the next day in the office? And ideally, you want your first follow-up touch point to come within the first 24 hours after the event. And that can be one of two things. The best case is that you or someone on your team is able to call everyone individually who came to the event, thank them for coming, see if they have any questions, remind them of whatever your offer is, and kind of this casual thank you call. Now, depending on the number of people you have, your team, you may not be able to call everyone within 24 hours. In that case, I would, send out an email, thank you to everyone for coming and let them know that you're going to be reaching out via phone call, X, Y, and Z. That first initial email can have, various things in it. It can, you should thank people for coming to the event. If they were given any sort of handouts, you might want to provide like links to a digital version of that. Sometimes, people lose things, they wrote notes on it and they want a clean version. So you can, provide them with that. And this is key. This is something that, someone who I met with last week in my program had not done, and that I kind of encouraged her to go back and make her ask stronger, is she included some really great resources in it, right? She included a note sheet and some educational resources. It was very well written, but at no point did she mention that they could come in or call to schedule a meeting. There was no opportunity for them to take the next step. Now, herself was going to call all of the people individually in the next day or so, which is great. But number one, we can't assume that these prospects know what we want them to do next. You kind of have to tell them. And two, you want to make it as easy as possible for them to take the next step. And not everyone's going to pick up the phone call when you call them. They might be busy. They might just not answer. You want to make sure that there's at least one line in that first follow-up that says, if you have questions about your situation, here's how you can schedule a meeting with me. It's absolutely critical. You're not going to come off as salesy because you have one line in there about coming in for a meeting. Again, people, came to your event, they sat through it. They're accepting future communication from you. Make it easy for them to take the next step. So that I would say is kind of within the first 24 hours what you should be focusing on. Definitely want to call everyone within 72 hours. And if you can't do 24 hours for a phone call, send them a thank you email and then get working on calling. Sending handwritten thank you notes is a great touch too. We have some advisors who do that depending on, how many people they have coming and their capacity, but that's always a very nice touch as well. I would say within a week of the event, you want to focus on kind of your second follow-up. Again, that first follow-up was probably a phone call or a thank you email. That second follow-up can be a little bit more education focused. So maybe an article reprint from the Horsesmouth Library on that topic, or a piece that you've written, a video you've done, things where you're kind of going more in depth on something that you talked about during your educational event. There was one advisor, who actually I thought had a great idea for his follow-up, and he created an FAQ sheet on the topic, and he made that one of his follow-ups where he kind of said, you've sat through this presentation. I know we did Q&A. These are some common questions I get on it that I just wanted to send out to you. And so I thought that was a really nice kind of educational piece. Of course, you always want to include a call to action. Again, schedule a meeting, do this, whatever you want them to do, make sure you're mentioning that during the follow-up piece. So now that's a week post event. For the people that you called who you haven't gotten in touch with, they didn't answer, they haven't called you back, you might want to give them a second call just to, again, say, hey, just wanted to call, see if you had any questions, from the event and see what you thought about it. Um, and then after that, say 2 weeks out, I would send another kind of educational piece that's pertinent to the topic you talked about. If you're doing a future event, you can invite them to come to that, remind them of that call to action. And then from there, you certainly want to add everyone, regardless of whether they're taking action or not, onto your ongoing communication list. I can't tell you how many advisors will say things like, I did the Social Security event. And 2 years later, someone came into my office and said, "Hey, I was at your event 2 years ago. I wasn't ready to do anything, but you've sent me all this stuff. You've stayed top of mind, and now I'm ready to take action." So that's kind of your first 30 days of what you want to do. But also remember that it's going to take people sometimes longer than 30 days. So don't, once you have their contact information, unless they specifically ask you to not send me anything or they opt out, keep them on your newsletter list, keep them on your future event invitation list. Any kind of other educational pieces you send out, share it with them. You never know when, something in their life is going to change and that they are ready to take action. But again, the critical things I really want to kind of remind everyone of here is number one, your follow-up starts at the very beginning of your event when you mention what that process is going to look like. And two, don't be shy about telling people exactly what you're looking for them to do next. So don't shy away from saying you can book an appointment by calling this number because you're afraid that's going to come off too strong. Uh, you've done all the work of marketing your event, putting on your event, talking to everyone after the event. You don't want to let that slip because you're afraid of it coming off wrong. People expect that a little bit after an event, right? They expect there to be next steps, especially if you set the stage during your presentation of this is what follow-up looks like. Make sure that you're making it easy for them. I recommend for advisors who, compliance allows it, to have some sort of online calendar link where you can simply send that out and say you can book an appointment here and it shows your open times. I think that reduces a lot of friction between having to pick up the phone and call and figure out people's calendars. So I always recommend that because I think it's a really easy way for people to kind of click a link, check their own calendar, say I can do this time and not have to, call during business hours or during the week. They can do it on their own time. So that's another kind of tip that we have here. But the key thing is you want a system in place. You want to mention it during your presentation. You can kind of tweak it as you go through the process and learn, but you always want to make sure that you're not waiting until after your event to start thinking about follow-up. You should have that system in place before the event even starts. So that is where we're at for kind of our main event today. I'll take a minute here to pause to see if we have any questions before we jump into the marketing activities. And
Dan,
then,
have you ever heard any advisors offering like a discount or something on like a consultation?
yeah, so, advisors all have kind of different things that they offer after the educational events. I would say the majority of advisors now will kind of do like a free 15-minute discovery call, a good fit call to see, if they're a good fit for the client and the client's a good fit for them. Some advisors will do a follow-up, say they're doing a Social Security event. Their follow-up might be you can come in for a Social Security analysis, and sometimes they'll offer that for free, but they'll let people know like normally this costs X amount of money, and I'm giving you a complimentary. We always say the word complimentary, not free. It sounds a little bit better. So some advisors will do that. Some will say like, okay, you can come in. I'll do the analysis for you. If you become a client, the analysis is, part of my AUM fee, and that's fine. If you don't and you want the report, you can pay for it, essentially. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it. We were actually talking about this during my monthly check-in with my advisors who are doing events right now, because one advisor had done about 4 events. Previously, he had been offering people to come in and do the Social Security analysis with the Savvy Social Security calculators. And he found that he was getting a little bit of pushback because people like didn't want to give him all that info without talking to him first. And so he actually was talking to the group about should I switch my initial contact to be like a phone call or a short meeting where we get to know each other, and then the next stage be that analysis. And the group and I kind of all agreed that if he was seeing that in his market, then that's what he should do. And that's kind of what Debbie Taylor went through when she started doing events is that she found when she was offering an analysis or some sort of financial planning report that oftentimes people didn't want to give all the info, or there were prospects who weren't really good fits for client as a client for her, and she was spending a lot of time doing these analysis and reports for people who really didn't fit into her clientele. And so she switched to doing what she calls the 15-minute good fit call. Again, so both parties can see if this is a good fit, and then they decide to proceed from there. And that kind of changed it for her, and she continues to do that. And I think that's the way that most advisors now are handling it. So yeah, some still kind of do like the discounted thing, but I would say the majority offer like a free 15-minute consultation, and then they kind of go from there. And I think that works for most advisors.
15 minutes, that's pretty average.
Yeah, it was 15 to 20 minutes. Of course, if it's a good conversation going, most will kind of stay on or they'll book that next meeting. But it's enough time to kind of get to know people, see if it's going to be a good fit, and then most prospects are a little bit more comfortable saying, okay, here's my social security report and you can run the analysis. I know who you are, we've talked and all of that. Or, similarly, if, you're talking and you're kind of getting those key data points from the prospect and you realize that they're not necessarily going to be a good fit, some people will end the conversation there. Some will still do the report and then kind of just like send it to them and be on their way. But then, you both kind of have a little bit more control of the situation before you dive into something like doing a full report for someone.
Okay.
Great question, though. Thanks. Um, okay, we will now jump into the marketing activities for May and June. I'm gonna pull up my screen here. Again, this is the advisor client marketing calendar. Each month is built around a theme. The theme for May is retirement planning. So you can see here our article reprint is 5 questions to ask yourself 5 years before you retire. This is written by Elaine Floyd. Um, this is kind of a great piece to send out to people in that pre-retiree phase who are thinking about retiring. It asks them questions like where you're going to live, things to think about being close to family, affordability. Are you planning on traveling? If you want to work, what's the employment like there? What will you do? Right? Are all your hobbies going to be creating expenses, or is there anything you're going to be doing to bring in income? Things like that. How do you want to live, right? A more simple life, high-end life, your longevity, surprises that life has in store. So this is just kind of a good overall piece about things people should be thinking about as they enter a new phase of life. Also for May, we have our Key Birthdays postcard, but I want to spend a minute talking about the client letter for May because that came out today on the Horse's Mouth website. And this is just I think, an underutilized piece by a lot of members. This is every month we have Charles Sherry write a client letter that you can use as is, or you can take pieces of it. So if you're someone who's struggled with doing a newsletter in the past, but you've wanted to, this could be a good solution for people. It has kind of this editing guide where you can, just download the file and then work from there. But it's a really well-written piece. Each month, again, kind of goes on a theme. This is all about, retirement accounts and how they're not all the same. It's pretty hefty. So again, sometimes advisors will take pieces of it and include it. But again, it has a lot of really good info in it, and it is yours to use. So I just wanted to spend some time highlighting that. It comes out the first Thursday of every month. So that's kind of a piece you always have access to. And then for the month of June, looking ahead, our theme is estate planning, and our reprint is Last Will and Testament. Add a letter covering these 14 wishes. So this is another piece that goes into things you should have kind of in your safe, ready to go. That goes into things that legal documents don't always contain, but might be important to you and your legacy. People to be notified, funeral arrangements, kind of things, website logins and passwords. This is really interesting. Sean Bailey and I were talking about this recently, this whole idea of like your like digital life will, where now we have so much of our life is online. Um, and who's in charge of that when you're no longer here. How can they make sure they can access your social media accounts, online banking, all of that in a way that they're not trying to spend all this time getting passwords and usernames. So I know there's a lot of tools out there like digital vaults where you can input all of this. I know some of you probably use those with your clients. I know that exists. But something that you might want to just kind of talk about with clients too, as you think about, as I think about estate planning and legacy planning of, there's are kind of the regular things we think about, but also your online life and how you can make that easy to manage for, the people who need to do that when you pass. So this is, I think, a really interesting piece. And again, kind of just goes through organization systems for these kind of important documents moving forward. And then we also have the client letter for June that will come out as well. So that's kind of what we're looking at for the next 60 days as we move forward. With the marketing calendar. Again, this is the advisor client version. There's also one for our master members on the master member site. Pull it up quickly just so you can see where that is as well. So yeah, you see it here, April, May and June right here. So again, that is available to you all. We encourage you to use it if you're, looking for a kind of ready to go communications and event plan. We try to make it as easy as possible for you. So that is where we're looking at for your marketing activities. And then we do have a member question that came in ahead of time that I'll go ahead and answer. So one of the questions was, how can I attract younger pre-retirees before they already have an advisor relationship? So I think that's a common thing people are seeing now where maybe your client book is aging and they're looking at getting in younger people to kind of, fill those spots as your book ages a little bit. And I think that right now is actually a great opportunity for that because Gen X is really coming into that pre-retiree stage. And we've spent a lot of time, right, marketing all of this stuff to boomers. And there are still boomers who are in that stage too, but now we have Gen X coming into it as well, and many of them have really not been approached by advisors. They haven't been invited to these educational events. And they haven't gotten these kind of communication pieces before on these things that are now really pertinent in their lives. And so I think changing your market, if you're an advisor who does events, changing your marketing to be really explicit to Gen X can work really well right now. So if you're gonna do a Social Security presentation, you could even like make the title like Savvy Social Security Planning for Gen X. I guarantee you they haven't seen that before, and it's gonna pique their interest to bring them in. I think educational events still really work well for the Gen X crowd. I would still do that. And I'll also note just kind of an observation that I've been making, and some of us at Horse's Mouth have been making over the past 60 days, is it seems that for whatever reason, educational events, advisors who are doing them right now are filling rooms. Like unanimously are filling rooms. I met with, again, my group this past week, and almost everyone who has done events is having, 30 people in a room. I don't know if that's just the market or what's going on, but now seems to be really a really good time to do events. So if you're thinking about getting in those younger pre-retirees, Gen X who hasn't been marketed to a lot or invited to these events, now might be a really good time to start thinking about doing that and looking into that. So just as an aside, that is something I would mention as well. But that kind of brings me to the end of my spiel for this month.
Devin, real quick.
Yeah.
So you mentioned your group.
Yes.
You have a new group coming
Yes.
up
Yes.
of Liftoff, right?
Yes. I am doing another Liftoff Financial Educator group starting June 3rd. For those who don't know, our Liftoff Financial Educator group is all about doing events. So when I was talking about the follow-up when we started this program today, we do a whole module on follow-up. That's just, one part of the program, but we walk you through the entire process of putting on events. So from marketing to picking your topics to marketing your venue, doing the presentation itself, key things to keep in mind, follow-up, all of that is, part of the process. And we really want everyone to walk away with a personalized 12-month marketing plan around events and what they're going to do. Like I said, we had one group that went through the program back of January, February of this year. And they have been great. Almost all of them are putting on events now and, have things scheduled. And what's great is like everyone's doing something that's a little bit different. For example, one advisor has kind of partnered with a new local coffee shop in his area, and he's doing these Social Security events in their meeting space at this coffee shop. I have another advisor, like who I mentioned, is doing universities. One's doing libraries. I had one advisor who did two dinner seminars last week, and she filled both rooms of 30 people doing dinner events. So they're all going out there and doing different things and all having great success. So if you'd like to learn more, I think Doug put the link there in chat about our next program starts June 3rd. It's 4 weeks, and we also meet uh, an additional day during the week as kind of our office hours, and we just kind of talk about different things. And then, like I said, we have monthly check-ins after that, so we can support you for the next 6 months through the process as well. So if you want to learn more, the link's there. You could also reach out to me directly, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Um, but yeah, that's it. We'll be back in June with our next meeting. We look forward to seeing you then.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks.